Welcome to this session that is called Fraud, Gaps and Loopholes, Private and Public Counteractions and Enforcement to Complement Regulations. So BIOFACH is the place where people meet not only from business but also from enforcement agencies, from regulators, lawmakers, certifiers, inspectors. Everybody is here, and as you see, we have a line of speakers from various backgrounds, and I'm happy to say that apart from the regulator, Jenny Tucker, we have an accreditor being present with David Crucefix and Jochen Neuendorff. He's a certifier. We have Gwendolyn from an organic trade association in the US. So again, a different perspective, the private perspective. Then we have Albrecht from CERES, a certification body working on an international level. And I'm also happy to have Mr. Lickfett here from eurofins. I attended a conference in Denmark on fraud and traceability, and when he gave his presentation from a company that I thought is in analytics, I was surprised to hear his focus on analytics is not enough. We also need the non-analytical tools. And as we as organic services are into fraud prevention, integrating certification with trade transaction data for fighting fraud with a mass balance system, I was pleased to hear that because that's what we do. So I invited him to join us and to talk about this balance between non-analytics and analytics. So also welcome to him. And finally, and that is also quite important, we have two speakers on group certification and on what they do when they have thousands of farmers to organize, and how you can enhance also the integrity of the system. And I'm sure that this is still one of the weak points if you think about all the coffee, all the cacao and many other products that are coming from smallholder organizations, that the enforcement in the regulations in smallholder groups is, to my understanding, in many cases far too weak. And we can expect that both the EU and NOP will look to more enforcement also for the sector of grower groups.
So now I would like to tell you about our upcoming changes to our regulations. We call this the Strengthening Organic Enforcement Rule. The next two slides give a preview of what that rule will be proposed to do. There are three major buckets to the rule, and all of these changes are designed to increase accountability and visibility. There's been a tremendous growth in the market. We've seen a number of changes that have to happen in the regulations in order to close the loopholes that we have all been observing. So two of the biggest actions were legislatively outlined in our Farm Bill. So that's how Congress tells us their priorities in the U.S. system. So the Farm Bill, number one, closes the loophole on uncertified handlers. So right now in the NOP system, handlers, brokers do not need to be certified because they're moving product but aren't necessarily handling or processing. That loophole will be closing. So all uncertified handlers will need to get certified. We're predicting that in the NOP system, that's more than 1,000 new certification of brokers who currently aren't certified. This is a big change. Import certificates will be mandatory coming into the United States. So if you're selling organic product into the United States, Each shipment will need to be accompanied by an import certificate under the new rules. And then finally, there are several provisions in the rule that came as a result of our observations, as a result of the Farm Bill, as a result of feedback from stakeholders, and feedback from our advisory board, the National Organic Standards Board. All of these will strengthen accreditation and certification oversight. Let's take a look at what those are. So they fall into the category of robust inspections, confirming organic status, and overseeing certifiers. So for example, unannounced inspections, which certifiers are doing now, will be codified into our regulations as required. There will be an increased emphasis on mass balance and traceability audits, which should be being done now, but will be mandatory and described in more depth in the regulations. Inspector qualifications are critical. We have to have the right people on the ground at the right time with the right skills. There will also be a section in the rule on grower groups. You know, it's an area of risk that many have discussed. We'll be bolstering the regulations on non-retail labeling, product moving very quickly, particularly in the fresh market. Certificates and data reporting will be more robust, and will codify requirements related to information sharing among certifiers. New office notifications for certifiers, as well as some modifications to our adverse actions procedures. So this is a sneak preview of what is coming in the rule. So let's look at the next steps. The proposed rule should publish very soon, in the matter of a couple of, we're hoping within the next month, a proposed rule will be published. Everyone around the world will have 60 days to comment on the rule. So you can tell us what is good about the rule, you can tell us what you think should change about the rule. Any recommendations you have for how to protect the market in different ways will be welcome as part of that proposed rule. This is a very public process. It will be posted on regulations.gov, so you will be able to see other people's comments as well as they submit comments for the system.
Well, GFRS engages since many years in the anti-fraud initiative. This initiative exists since 2007, and well, our experience is that originating from many international meetings, many national meetings, that fraud prevention, for a solid fraud prevention, the competence of operators, of organic inspectors, of the assessors, of the accreditation bodies is the key. And there's also a second key, and the second key is the environment all these people work in. So it's not only the competence, it's really also about directions, it is about competition. I've only short time, I would say, coming back to the operators, we have a solid international problem with competence of operators. We have a clear requirement under ISO 17065, which says everybody must have understood the standards and must apply them in practice. And this is laid down in an internationally globally used international standard. So unfortunately, we still see a little bit somewhere and here incompetent operators. So I think it's not properly applied. For the inspectors, as Jennifer said, we require competent inspectors. And these inspectors must be able in critical situation also to apply technological instruments, which we will get to know here in this session. And these instruments must be combinable according to the specific situation. So there is no universal solution. There is not a situation where you can standardize and say a full bookkeeping review is required in 100% of all operators. And there's also not a requirement Well, in 110% of cases, we must calculate the mass balance. It depends on the situation, on the context, and what the inspection is for. And the third element are the competent assessors, the evaluators, the supervisors, moving out and, well, looking to the situation on the ground, evaluating the inspectors. And if these guys only refer to formalities and not to contents, then we have a problem.
We've come over the many years now to understand that not all operators are the same. They're different in structure, they're different in importance in the supply chain, complexity, multiple sites, different field locations and so forth. Some are global, some are local, long, short supply chains. So fine, we've got used to that now, and assessing risk, and more importantly, responding to that, is absolutely key. And I think many certifiers in the room, inspectors, assessors will understand that very well. It's something we've become much more understanding over the 20, 30 years that we've been doing this sort of business altogether. Even now we started out talking about country risk, not just a level of operator. And most CBs certainly will implement some sort of risk-based approaches, although I must admit, in my opinion, there's quite a lot of variation still in how we do that and how it's implemented. So risk at the level of the certifier is much less discussed, in fact. And some ABs and authorities, we've just been having some conversations today about this with other authorities. So we've been doing the looking at what comes into assessing a CB risk level and what we can do about that. So we've been doing that for some years now, but we're still fine-tuning how that really works. A risk factor which Jochen just mentioned there is the one in the middle here, the sort of what we call motivation, which might come from profit and growth on the far side, and perhaps integrity, reputation on the other side. Somewhere along that line is where both operators may be, but also where CBs may be, in fact. So we've got to recognize that. It's the whole business approach, business policy. Are you here to expand and grow, or are you here to protect integrity? Is key to how, for example, how an assessor might work, and also how a certifier might work, and how a producer might work. To ensure better focus on the poor performers, which is what we want to do, we do need to be able to identify them. And more importantly, we need to upgrade the competence, as Jochen says, and approach our assessment, other AB's assessment, to a more, what we've got at the bottom here, this sort of performance or outcome based. So in the past, we've, as Jenny was alluding to, perhaps we've gone a same for all type of approach. Everyone's equal. We just do an annual inspection on our own assessment. Rather inflexible in the approach we've taken. We create more rules because we think that must be better than having fewer. And we try and train our inspectors or assessors. What we're thinking about trying to do is obviously much more risk-based, as we've been talking about. Make ourselves much more flexible in how we approach this. Use our common sense. One of my colleagues always says, use your common sense. It's very basic stuff. If you want to go down a certain rabbit hole to identify something or clarify something, then you must do it and feel empowered to do it. Be more intelligent with how we approach this in all sorts of ways. So, not only should CVs and our assessment of CVs be ensuring that they meet the requirements for certification, but they should be achieving the desired outcome, and hence the word here. So what are we trying to do here? It is the outcome, ultimately, that we want to deliver. So when a CV tells us, for example, that they have no high-risk operators, we've heard that before, the AB or authority should at the very least ask more questions. Well, how can that be when everyone else has some high-risk operators? When a CV never raises any non-compliances against operators, we've seen that too sometimes, or in their own internal audits even. we should really do the same. Why can that be? How is that possible? When all samples taken by the CV are negative, we should question that too. How is that really possible? Is perhaps their sampling policy and procedure effective? So this is where the need to understand the CV management also and direction policy, business policy comes in. It really has a key influence on how personnel work and their overall performance. And we as assessors and authorities need to consider its effect on the overall outcome, which ultimately is the integrity of organic claims. So what we're trying to say here is it's not just compliance, it's performance, it's outcome is what we're trying to deliver. We must start thinking about that much more. The way we write rules and regulations must take that into account. What are we trying to achieve? So the competence and motivation of operators, certifiers and ABs and authorities is key, and we must make a shift towards assessing our performance, the performance, and work on that basis. It's not just about compliance. Thank you very much.
Talk to you all about today, though, is the role of the private sector, specifically our private sector initiative, and that includes the responsibility of the private sector to report fraud when they suspect or they detect it. So a little bit about the guide, because the guide forms the basis to this program that's called Organic Fraud Prevention Solutions. What this guide does is it walks a company, and this could be a farmer, this could be a producer, a handler, a retailer, a buyer, seller. It walks a company through a systematic risk-based process for developing an organic fraud prevention plan. And I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that in just a moment. But the guide is based on a model that is a globally recognized and leading model for preventing food fraud. So when we all came together and we were working on these best practices, I started looking around thinking, well, you know, fraud's been around since the Middle Ages. Surely we don't need to invent this. There must be a lot of good work that's already out there. And really, I just, as we say, hit the jackpot in that I found Michigan State University and their food fraud initiative. They formed a model that's essentially based on this concept of thinking like a criminal. And carrying out what's called a vulnerability assessment and identifying where in your supply chain and really company-wide, where are those gaps, where are those loops, where are those weaknesses, where's a company most vulnerable to fraud? And it really brings together criminology and supply chain management and takes into all sorts of different factors, looking at supply chain mapping to socio and economic considerations, history, et cetera, It identifies those vulnerabilities and then develops mitigation measures, an entire mitigation strategy to deal with those vulnerabilities. So this model, it was developed by an individual named Dr. John Spink. This model was adopted or first recommended by what we call the Food Fraud Think Tank in 2012. And then it was formally adopted by the Global Food Safety Initiative. How many people in the room are familiar with GFSI or the Global Food Safety Initiative? How about FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, BRC, SQF? So this was developed under a food management system, and all of these food safety certifications that I just mentioned, they require this model. If you're GFSI certified, you have to go through this process of carrying out a vulnerability assessment and putting this mitigation plan in place. So a little bit more about the program. The program is a voluntary program for certified organic businesses. To enroll in the program, you must be right now certified to the USDA organic program, as well as be an Organic Trade Association member. We're still in a pilot phase for this first year. After a year, we'll open it up to non-members. Again, this is a preventative approach that focuses on reducing the fraud opportunity. It's called what in criminology they refer to as target hardening. If I'm the target and you are all the fraudsters or the perpetrators, I'm going to strengthen. I'm going to strengthen and I'm going to block, I'm going to shield all of you from coming in through my front door as the fraudsters. So It also, in terms of the goal of the program, it assures authenticity of organic products by minimizing or eliminating fraud. And then the end goal for all of the certified operators that are enrolled in the program is that they develop this organic fraud prevention plan, and then they integrate it into the organic certification system, in that it becomes part of what we have in the United States, the Organic Systems Plan. So this is a real unique aspect about this private program, is that it does get brought into the annual certification process by way of the Organic Systems Plan. I want to be really clear also in saying that this is not a certification program, it's not a verification program, it's not an add-on label. This is an internal quality control program. It's based on buyer responsibility. It's based on supply chain management. It's based on supply chain traceability. Get to know your supplier, know everybody through the supply chain back to the farm. It's a program that complements and reinforces the work of certification agencies and the oversight and the enforcement of the National Organic Program. And then finally, as I mentioned, it's a program that provides extensive training at the beginning, required by anybody that enrolls in the program. And when companies go through the program and complete the enrollment process, they do get recognized. A company that completes the enrollment process, you can find them on a search engine for organic ingredients and products called Find Organic. So if you are a buyer and you're looking for a supplier that has gone through this program and has an organic fraud prevention plan in place, you'd be able to look them up on Find Organic. So I was asked to say a little bit about some of the big learnings or the takeaways, if you will, from the task force and the pilot program. The first, it sounds quite simple, and it really is, but it really truly was a breakthrough for every single company that in the pilot program that went through this process of carrying out a vulnerability assessment. That this is truly the first step from a business perspective. The first and most important step to preventing fraud is to go through this very in-depth process of identifying where you are vulnerable to fraud and putting those mitigation measures in place. If everybody in the supply chain is doing that, that target hardening, it continues to build and build, and you continue to build a long, strong wall that keeps the fraudster out. Another really, really important and surprisingly wonderful outcome that the companies that have gone through the program have experienced is that when you carry out that vulnerability assessment, the first thing that you do is you put together an organic fraud prevention team. And this is a cross-functional, multidisciplinary team that brings together the quality assurance, quality control department into buying and procurement. It brings in human resources, it brings in legal. The entire company sits down together to look at all of these different variables and factors to figure out where these vulnerabilities are. And that in turn really just creates stronger systems. Every department learned more about what the other departments were doing, were able to come up with a more effective organic fraud prevention plan. And then finally, there are many, many lessons that were learned, but I'm just highlighting some of the biggies. It was absolutely agreed upon that the organic sector, the private sector, has a responsibility to report fraud. If you suspect fraud, if you detect fraud, you have to submit that. You have to submit that complaint to your certifier, to the National Organic Program, or whatever your competent authority, whoever your competent authority must be. And when you submit that complaint, you have to submit enough information, enough evidence for it to be an actionable complaint. We found that so many people, they don't know how to submit a complaint. They just really, they might want to, but they don't know how to get there. So an additional aspect to the Organic Fraud Prevention Guide is we've included a section that describes what to do when you suspect or you detect fraud, and we've included a template in there. We worked with the National Organic Program to learn from their experiences of what a complete complaint looks like, and we put a template in there that helps somebody organize all of the information that would be needed to submit an actionable complaint. So in closing, I'd just like to say that leadership and commitment from organic businesses really will strengthen the organic supply chain. They're really right on the front line of defense. The more people that enroll in the program, the stronger the supply chain becomes, and each company that enrolls in the program will make a difference.
what is wrong with some certifiers, not with the certifier. I think Jochen and David already talked about this balance between integrity and business. We are private businesses, we have to earn money and rely on our clients. So how do we keep this balance? The problem with many of the places where we work is that for our inspectors, the organic consumers are strange people in a faraway place, that they don't really understand who they are and why they are willing to pay more money for an organic product. On the other side, there's personal integrity. There are sometimes counterproductive remuneration schemes, inspectors being paid for bringing new clients, fear of losing reputation, there's corruption, there's fear of losing accreditation, there's a social hierarchy that sometimes makes it difficult for the inspector to do his job because the operator is at a higher level than the inspector. There's a professional pride, there's competition with other certifiers, there's the will to promote export from the country. Longing for harmony is a strong motivation for people not to address severe things. Take it easy, lack of competence, and fear of liability risks, and that makes, and often the balance falls down on this side. How can it be put back in balance? Is by support to the certifiers and a strong oversight system. So what is wrong with the oversight system? Difference between small fish versus big fish. The small fish are, this is a case from Office, the EU Organic Farming Information System. There were 10 big bags with wheat and spelt, and there was a complaint that it had been labeled as from in conversion to organic farming. Actually, the claim was right, but it's not allowed to use that claim from third country. We spent about 4 months with this complaint, interchanging information with 2 other certifiers, with 2 national authorities, with the EU Commission, etc. The big fish banana plantation, again, 180 hectares, started conversion in January 2018. CERES certified it as in first year of conversion. They decided that CERES was not a good certification body. They changed to somebody else who immediately certified them as organic. Now 5,000 to 10,000 boxes of conventional bananas are entering the EU every week with an organic claim. We have contacted 3 other CBs, 2 national authorities, 1 accreditation body, the European Commission, and nothing happened. They continue importing these bananas weekly. Bureaucracy versus real issues. Bureaucracy, during many years we worked as a CB in Spain. All the non-conformities that the Spanish authority identified we had changed the version of a document from our quality manual without informing them. We had a new template in our quality manual that we had not uploaded in their database. We had not uploaded the training records, etc. Those were the types of non-conformities. At the same time, the real issues. This is a so-called certificate for a fertilizer that was issued by a Spanish control body. I mean, anybody with a minimum knowledge of agronomy, of agriculture, knows that a fertilizer with 24% of ammonium cannot be a fertilizer that is allowed in organic farming. It took several months several reminders that we sent to the Spanish authority. They didn't do anything about it until the German authority interfered and said, this is something serious and do something about it. And after that we detected that there were many other similar fertilizers out there used commonly in Spain in vegetable production. What could be done better? More meaningful risk analysis. David and Jochen already talked about this. So I did a quick check of the NOP Organic Integrity Database a few days ago on CERES as compared to some of our closest competitors. How many clients have we certified? How many have we suspended and revoked? And what is the percentage of suspended and revoked certificates? I'm not saying that the goal, the more clients you suspend, the better you are. But it's if you have around 1,000 clients like this last one and have suspended only one, that is not realistic. And this was also already mentioned by, I think, David. I mean, I spoke to a colleague from another certifier, and what is the motivation? He was the manager after it had been bought up by a large international company, and he said he was going to quit his job because since they were bought up, there were exactly 3 quality goals that were EBIT, EBIT, and EBIT. More efficient use of resources. We had an audit by the European Commission to one client in West Africa. 3 auditors, in total 40 to 50 man days. I don't know how much that costs the European taxpayers, but I don't think it was a very efficient use of available resources. So what should be done? Better and less predictable audits, better risk analysis, more competent authorities, one single address for fraud cases, which exists in NLP but does not exist in the EU, more support against liability claims for certifiers, concentrate on the big fish, less phosphonic acid and anthraquinone nonsense that keeps us busy, more agronomy and less discussions about certifier code numbers.
We are from the Eurofins group, and as Gerald said in the beginning, Eurofins is normally known as an analytical company, and that's sure we analyze some things, but on the other side we see more and more that our customers have a lot of problems through the complete supply chain. And as a laboratory, we see that we have not enough knowledge in the beginning to give good recommendations to our customers. So I will give you some example. Only 20% of the samples we get in our lab are with information about the origin, only 20%. So we do not know where the samples came if we analyze pesticides or some other things. So that means we have some analyzers to do something. For example, residue analysis of organic, unorganic contaminations. We can analyze fertilizer, especially nitrogen, for example, if it's mineral or non-mineral. We can see the origin with the isotope analysis, or we can check if some problems with the GMO with the PCR or DNA analysis. And on the other side, we see that we have some methods like audits, risk analysis, trainings, and so on. And we have to combine both things to give the customer a very good solution. A big producer of spices told us, okay, we want to have one safety partner. I have a product at the end, a brand, and the consumer trusts this brand. And it's your challenge to show us that it works in the future too. So I will give you some money and I want to have some more money back at the end. Supply chain changes, especially in the last 10 years. So we had in the beginning a list of experts, of technicals, analyzers and so on, and we see more and more it's necessary to know everything about the complete supply chain. And that is what we have heard from the other speakers. For example, the risk analysis, for the traceability, for history, distribution, local. So, and this is only one part of the supply chain, but it starts with the risk analysis. We can help our customers, but we have to know what's going on. And that means to develop a safety concept. It's like in the car industry, if you want to create a new model, you sit together with your suppliers and so on and create a new model. And I believe that is more and more necessary for the future, together with the analytical companies or with the certifiers and so on, that we really have a safe supply chain. Only for the traceability, the knowledge of origin of the product, I have said, it would be good if you send in a sample to the lab, if you tell us the origin. You have to know something about the suppliers, working conditions, environmental inputs, and impacts, and so on. Complex supply chains are, at the moment, a daily business. And if we know all this, then at that point we have the possibility to decide in which directions we want to go with our quality management. How I combine the normal management, quality management with the open questions of the risk analysis. And if we have done these two steps, then we as a lab are able to give you some recommendations what you can do with the open questions.
It is so important to know everything about the supply chain, because you are responsible against your customer. That's very easy.
Risk analysis, we have heard about, is quite easy if you talk about a product which is just a monoproduct. You see, in Apple, it's an easy case. But it's more complex, of course, if we have a composite product which has many ingredients and many components to look like it. If we just take this example from the middle position, from the producer, then we have several raw materials which we use for the product. We have, for instance, raisins, we have oat flakes, we have pumpkin seeds which we want to use in the finished product. And say, okay, we have some good contact to the suppliers we use, we have audited them, we have visited them, we have talked to them, see what is the risk maybe. We've checked the storage they use and what kind of cleaning process they have applied. Okay, and then it's okay, our risk assessment for the product says, for the raisins from region, for instance, there's maybe risk for the disinfection of the drying facilities or the pesticide use in neighboring fields. For the oat flakes, okay, it came from Germany in this case, say maybe a contamination with the growth regulator could be a problem. And for the pumpkin flakes, okay, from Austria, we have a supplier in China. The risk is a little bit depending on the region, whether we are getting them from, and maybe a problem with persistent organic contaminants.
Okay, and to check this, we're using an instrumental method and say, okay, we take samples and make an analysis to see whether the risk can be confirmed. If we want to evaluate the results, then we have to stick on the regulation on organic farming. Maybe we found something from the analysis of the raisins in the processed product. Then we cannot say, of course, whether it's a fraud or not. We have to check again the whole process of the supplier again and say what can we do about it and where does it come from. The same goes if we find something, a process contaminant maybe, or say we find some chlornitrate in the oat flakes. We have to check again
Where does it come from? A little bit more easy, or say more clear maybe the situation for the pumpkin place. If you find indeed persistent organic contaminants, okay, then is it maybe really a contaminant because it's known that it can be there in the pumpkin plates. But of course, it cannot be decided without knowledge about the region where is this, what is the situation locally. This is just the situation from the raw material. Okay, we have the raw material checked, we have decided, okay, we want to have it in, we want it imported for production, and then we have the issue of transportation, which has to be taken into consideration. There can a lot of things happen, of course, which we make to sure that it does not happen. And finally, that products arrive in our final storage for production. Okay, we have our 3 products we have talked about, but for our final product we need, of course, a little bit more raw materials which I not have mentioned. But it can be quite a lot for the final product, which we have to check in the same way, of course. Even in the production, we are not finished yet. We have all the products in our storage, but now we want to produce the final product, and then we have to check what is our procession line, for instance. Have we only ordered organic products? How do we do our own cleaning or disinfection of the product? Is there contamination possible within the production? And finally, what produced as packaging material. The problem, of course, in the end is if any of one ingredient is not compliant, we have a problem in the final finished product. The fraud can happen in any of the steps I mentioned during the whole process. So the evaluation of the finished product is far more complex than for the ingredients we have used. If you would check the finished product for any of the residues and do analysis of them, we have the problem that residues in the final product are diluted, or the product itself is not homogeneous because of the different ingredients in there, and it's not possible from the finished product to distinguish anyway between a possible contamination during the whole chain and possible food fraud.
So the first step for us to get ahead of the potential fraudulent behavior was to find a system that allows us to shorten the time and distance that it takes for the information from a traditional internal control system to come to us. With our operation literally spread all over the country, the handwritten reports had to come from the fields, be digitalized, then analyzed, and this usually would take somewhere between 30 to 45, even 60 days. Definitely way too long to do something against any potential risks. After a rather lengthy period of studies, analysis, and looking at different options in the market, we decided to come for a combination of 3 different digital components with the goal to combine them, all of them, into one platform within 2 to 3 years after start. I repeat, in a traditional handmade internal control system, the time gap from inspection to analysis and conclusion was way too long, way too big. Many different steps and lots of special knowledge is needed to detect and eliminate this risk from farm to export container if you want corrective measures to be successful. We cannot allow for time gaps, so we need the information immediately at hand. So we decided to find such knowledge and enter into a strategic alliance with Organic Services and CERES for the electronic internal control system and respective development of all the automated reports, with Logicsoft in Guatemala and Hipper Consult for the development of internal applications, which Roman will explain, and an ERP system by Logicsoft, where all these 3 systems then reflect into daily reporting and controls. With the Alliance, we look to achieve the following goals: constant electronic and physical traceability, immediate response to problems and/or contamination risks, reduce the time investments we had in the internal control system, and thus spend more time training the farmers and suppliers. The internal control system of organic services and our own apps are fully available offline, so we do not depend on internet connections. They work anywhere in the fields. Empowerment of the producers was one of the other targets. So at some point we want to make them available on their cell phones, all the information they need to take the proper decisions. And shorten the response time to new requirements.
So what have we achieved up to now? The internal control system of organic services, where we organize all on-field inspections of our producers and their certifications, is completely online. We handle all operations outside of our production centers through offline mobile apps. That includes the internal control system, but also purchase-related tasks like contracting, reception on-farm, and reception at our facilities. Once internet is available, all offline information uploads directly into the ERP system. We can manage all of our production processes inside the ERP system, including batch traceability and cost management through the production chain. We use a standard business intelligence tool that permits us to create reports from various sources: internal control system, offline apps, ERP system, as well as third-party data. In that way, we can fully monitor traceability, as well as fulfillment of maximum certified quantities, and much, much more. Let's have a look at some internal and external aspects of the full electronic integration. In recent years, the number of certified farms has been growing. Over the last 2 years, we grew about 45%. Also, we employ more and more internal auditors. That requires a system that allows us to organize the inspectors and get the results immediately, without having to print thousands of sheets and without the risk of losing information. As a small side effect, we save about 20 to 30,000 sheets of paper per crop. We can also sanction sinners as soon as the info is uploaded and can follow up any non-conformities. Also, we can keep an eye on not exceeding the maximum volumes certified by the certification body. And with one button, we can calculate the incentives we have to pay to the producers. There is an increasing expectation and demand on the consumer side in terms of accountability, traceability, and transparency. With this system, we can tell at any point where the cocoa comes from and when and for which price it was purchased. We also want to empower the small producers by giving them access to our system to see all information related to their sales to our company. With each new ruling or law, we need to be able to supply more information in a shorter time. With this system, we have the perfect answer for growing demands. Also, we are prepared to offer data for any new marketing tools through digital traceability.
We do capture the field data straight into tablets. We can geotag the farms, so actually we know that the inspector has been there. Besides, we equip their motorcycle with GPS modules as well, so we can check if they're really there and not doing the handling from home. And that product platform allows us to add whatever product we want in the future. We want to go into agroforestry later down the road, so we just add bananas, pineapples, whatever it's going to be, with no issues. No need to buy an additional system, it works the same, you just change the product. The challenges that we have found along the last 18 months we have been introducing this is that the technician need to be not only thoroughly trained, but continuously trained. This is not a thing from they know how to work a cell phone and it works, no. They need to be trained every other month with new stuff and retrained, and it takes time. And the traditional agro-technician used to just scribble a few notes on a piece of paper and do a small plan. He needs to undergo a very, very strong mindset, change of mindset. Meaning, he has to be completely aware and identify his mindset with the fact that all that he's doing has a lot of consequences down the road. And that's something we have found to be missing before we started this project. So the strong mind change has somewhat proved to be the most difficult step in the whole thing. Of all our systems that we are joining together, we have been working on this now for 18 months, and we went live with all 3 systems at once on October 1st, are that we can do daily audits online on any of the information we want, be it from the production chain, from traceability, from any of the information we want. And for me also very important, before we had 35 to 45 days of information time from the ICS coming to us. Now we have it 24, 48 hours after inspection. So we see something, we can immediately send either shadow auditors to do these inspectors, to check the inspector's work, or send their supervisor and take corrective measures, or even, if necessary, suspend a supply. And we can produce digital and physical traceability at any time, at any part of the supply chain. So we basically can say we have control from the farm all the way to the vessel. Is it enough? I don't think so. I think we're at the beginning of a long and interesting road. There's lots of fine-tuning to be done. But I definitely think that we have already noticed a dramatic change in behavior in certain suppliers that now feel the control and that we are breathing down